Hi everyone, this is LeiLani Cauthen, your host from the Learning Council. I'm CEO and publisher here of our news media research organization, and we've grown a lot in the last year. 95,000 more subscribers have piled on. People are looking for answers to how to really do digital transition right now. So we're here with the EduJedi, which are, the people that have really started to get more and more sophisticated about what they're really doing with their digital mix. So we have activity 12 today, digital instructional design. So there's been a model advanced by the EduJedi for how to do digital instructional design that's different than age-old ways. And there's two ways to look at it. The first one is the workflow logistics one versus the old Addies models. There's other models out there. But that's what we're going to do today. So I have with us a lot of my good friends. Monika Davis, who's the CIO from DeKalb. Love to see her again. Hi, Monika. Oh, maybe we lost her. She'll be back. There you are. Okay, hi. And then good friend Brad Moser, who's the Director of Blended Learning from Blue Valley School District number 229. Hi.
Hi, all. Thanks for having me, LeiLani. It's always good to connect.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And then also Kimberly Knight, who's the CETL Director of Technology North Canton City Schools. Good to have you, Kimberly.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. And then also Dr. Wendy Oliver, who's the Chief Learning Officer from Edison. So Wendy's coming in with her team to basically, her and Kelly, to give us a little bit of color from the professional grade scene, like what's really happening with digital instructional design. At the professional grade level, like the people who like to obsess about it all day, every day, what a lot of teachers don't have the time to do. So I want to hear from her first to give us a little short intro of who they are. And then I'm coming back to each of my panelists to give us a little color around like what's happening for you in your district, what's going on in this instructional design area, right? Because it's not just like, give everybody logins, or just try to figure out how to teach on Zoom while having kids in front of you kind of a thing. There's a lot more to this transition. So I want to hear from you guys each on that. And then we're going to dig in to this design model discussion. Is that cool with everyone? Okay, here we go. All right. So Wendy, can you give us a little color about the professional grade scene?
Yeah, thank you, LeiLani, so much, and to the rest of the panel for letting us join you today. Like LeiLani said, it's really exciting for us because we have certified teachers that are trained as instructional designers on our staff, and it's what they do all day. So this is a fabulous conversation for us to be part of. I'm the Chief Learning Officer with Edison Learning, and believe it or not, we've been around for almost 3 decades, which just seems crazy. We have professional services where we train and partner with districts. We have approximately 150 online courses that can be used in a blended setting or in an asynchronous setting. We also have an instructional staff with certified teachers that teach students in multiple states. So we have a little bit of everything in the digital sector. It's really exciting. I think that we'll have some examples that may help with part of today's discussion, especially around how digital allows you to move out of that linear path with instructional design. So again, just excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to stroll through really quickly some of the screenshots of what you guys are doing on your side navigationally, like how you cause kids to get all the way through. And then we'll get back into this now. All right, so this is going to be a great day. Monika, can you go first? What is happening over there?
Well, what's happening is we have turned a corner. I was teasing in our leadership conference this summer. I was saying that we've gone from one extreme to the next with the pandemic itself, and our teachers have had to learn very, very fast. Something that as an instructional technology specialist that I was pushing many, many years ago and trying to get everybody on board, and now a lot of the people that I worked with during that part of my career, they're still here, and they're like, "You said that this was going to happen," and so we're there, and so I'm happy to hear that and to see that happen for our staff, so they can really see the dots start to join. I think for us as a school district in terms of instructional design, and as we move forward in this space, we definitely are looking at digital content. First of all, we need digital content because in order for instructional design to happen, you have to have something to pull together to create those learning experiences for students. So for us, it's to curate or to procure. When do you curate and when do you procure? And that decision, because I believe, and we believe actually, that sometimes it's better to create certain materials so that it's more authentic and related to your students situation. But sometimes it's more it's better for us to go ahead and procure, because for us, I know we had to spin up, I think it was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classes, because we had to provide them with virtual options, which we did not have content for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classes curated. We could have done that over the summer, but that wasn't realistic with what we had to work with. So we had to purchase content and reorganize it and scramble it according to, so those are the types of decisions that we've had to make in our school district. But we are going back after the dust settles a little bit and look at how do we fortify from an instructional design perspective, how do we really make that content pop and determine if that's what we need versus should we move to something else. So those are the types of decisions that our virtual learning team is making. Our virtual learning academy, they lead that effort and that they're making right now and trying to work through as we move forward. And then of course we're shifting to a new learning management system systemically. We are shifting to Canvas, and so that will be an interesting move, and looking at habits of the mind for all of our staff as it pertains to virtual learning and digital learning. So that's what's going on in the DeKalb County School District right now, and how we do that.
A lot more than what you're saying. You kind of, I can just feel the sophisticated many things underneath all of that. And yeah, shifting to a new LMS, that's not easy. But really what you're saying is you're in refinement mode. You're in level up mode.
We are, yeah. Yes. As we've been doing this for a while as a school district, and now it's time to, like you said, it's time to refine what we've done so far. Yes.
It's awesome. All right. Okay. So let's go on to Brad from Blue Valley. What's happening for you guys out there?
Yeah, I think Monika hit a lot of the things that I wanted to, that I would lead out with. And Monika, you just made a comment too around, we're letting the dust settle a little bit. We feel, I think, the same feelings here in Blue Valley, in that the pandemic, again, something you said, it kind of helped a lot of teachers that maybe had been, I don't want to say resistant to, but just they have some other options that are maybe on the low tech side of things that are kind of working well, and just not so that's comfortable and honestly it's kind of working. So why consider some other tools and resources, and so the pandemic kind of pushed a lot of folks, all of us really, to say, hey, let's make sure everyone knows how to connect via some video conference tool, whatever the platform is. We all now can do it. And honestly, now we're doing these like panels and these connections with everyone from all over the nation a lot more frequently, a lot more easily. And it's like, where maybe I would see tweets from Monika online or something like that. Now look at this, we're in the same room and it's just normal and natural. And so, that curve has I guess has brought that down a little bit lower for all of our teachers in Blue Valley. We can now connect just on a fly, on a whim, a lot more easily, thanks to the inertia of the pandemic. But in terms of what we're doing, I want to speak towards, I think our dust is settling. So now what? We came into this pandemic already having kind of a one-to-one, so equitable access to tools was already kind of laid out a couple years ago. We launched an LMS way early, and we kind of felt that we needed the online platforms for all of our classrooms to stay connected. And now that that was kind of a norm, the pandemic didn't shake us having to go find some LMS so that we could do a hybrid or a distance or remote, or like everyone swing between all three of those modes last year. And it was, we pulled our hair out, staying up late. Monika, we actually in the summer said, are we going to procure or are we going to build? And we're like, let's do it. Let's build. We had an LMS. Let's see if we can build our own content. And that was a huge, huge lift that this year and this summer, we did not feel that huge lift because we had already lifted last year. And so in terms of getting this year started, it's been a little bit lighter in that front because we kind of already, fell off the cliff last year. So as we look forward, I think some things that are on our chopping block have to do with like the use, the collection of and the use of data to inform instruction. Like these are good practices, but digital tools allow us to way more easily collect data that can way more easily provide immediate feedback for a student, but then go into a tool or a dashboard, whatever you want to call it, for teachers to collaborate around and then provide interventions and provide extensions from that. So our sort of focus is going to be on, hey, we have some really good tools that collect good data. We have some low-tech ways, formative assessments. How do we get those into a high-tech tool so we can quickly analyze and then react to that? I really think the pandemic's really given us some inertia to get into that mode, which, guys, let's be honest, this is just what teaching has been trying to do all along, right? We would do exit tickets on half sheets of paper, and then the next class period, do a small group based on how the kids scored on that. So it's not new practices, it's the right practices, but now we're trying to identify those tools that save us the time in doing that. So I think that's one thing you'll see. In Blue Valley, the pendulum's kind of swung back in that most kids are in person in school. Even our virtual kiddos that took virtual last year, honestly, most of them have gone back to the in-classroom. In our lean on a full virtual kindergarten classroom, full virtual, 7th grade classroom, it's actually kind of decreased. I don't know what's going to happen in the future here, but I anticipate the acceptance of blended learning, the acceptance of a hybrid model will be the wave of the future as we move forward. So that's a couple of thoughts. I have lots of other thoughts, but that's a couple I thought I'd share here.
All right. So Kimberly, Nidy, so good to have you. Give us a little color about what's happening over there.
Okay, well, I would fall in line with a lot of what was said already. I call it being pushed off the digital cliff here because we also had a one-to-one established for many years and had an LMS selected and out. But it was kind of amazing, I think, to everybody, not just me, how many people weren't really fully utilizing the LMS yet. And then it kind of started where a couple of the teachers started doing Bitmoji classrooms and really digging into organizing their content more than they ever had before and making it kind of the central hub for communication for students and parents. And that then kind of caught on because somebody that may not have been doing that kind of looked next door or during a meeting and said, hey, that looks pretty cool. What do you got going on there? And so we had a lot of kind of teaching and learning happening among our staff members. And then buildings, kind of hearing what the other building was doing. I mean, it was kind of fun to watch. If I would have set up a workshop for that, it wouldn't have gone as well, right? But when it's organic like that, and it was, the teachers were really interested in making things more streamlined. It helps them. I mean, I think they realize it helps them be more organized and intentional about what they're doing. And it lessens questions when students and parents know where to go to get information. Then we got to work a little deeper on design. What are we doing with students? Are we just taking a worksheet and making it digital? So we got to have those conversations about depth of knowledge. We got to have those conversations about, not trying to get through all of the content, but really concentrating on those priority standards and getting deeper into those, having students work on, which I still kind of laugh that we still call it 21st century skills because we're, 21 years in now, but it's still a thing happening out there, having students collaborate more, just the differences in how we changed the way we were learning. The thing that we found was that when the teachers came back, from remote, they commented quite a bit that they brought a lot of the skill sets and the things that they were doing during remote back to the in-person classroom because they found the value in it regardless of the learning environment. And so that was kind of a cool thing that happened. And then, kind of to Brad's point, we're now focusing on, we have some tools in place like a data system to be able to pull data out and look at things, as well as we are creating content as well in our LMS. We use Schoology. We have AMP, which is kind of a common assessment tool. And then that data feeds over along with test data and all kinds of grades, behavior into the other system that we use. So now we're concentrating on how do we close gaps? How do we see kind of where these kiddos are and what kind of tiered services then do we need to provide them, for growth everywhere, right? At the top and all along the sliding scale. So the conversations, kind of, if you're an education geek, it's super exciting because we're finally to these really deeper conversations about teaching and learning. And I think it's exciting, even for teachers who have been in the classroom for a really long time. It's almost like a revitalization, of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And, I think we're just going to see benefits. Even though we went through this horrible, horrible thing, I think that eventually we're going to look back and see, a list of benefits that came from it. So.
Point. Excellent points. And it made my mind go in a couple directions I think we're going to have to talk about today. But I was remiss in not making sure I introduced Kelly Murtagh. Hi, Kelly. She's going to also pop in and make some comments along the way. She's a specialist with Edison. Well, let's get into this conversation then about workflow logistics. So, of course, the 50-year-old model of instructional design doesn't necessarily acknowledge what tech is doing now, right? So let's just kind of look at that model a little bit, and I'm going to pull it up on my other screen so it's bigger and we can all see it easier. The Addies model is a really teacher-centric model, right? It's like the teacher's going to do everything. Developing, directing your attention, designing the things, distributing them. Those are all not in the Addies model, but that's what they're doing, right? So the EduJedi early last year, actually towards the end of the year before that, before the pandemic, talked about the EduJedi model in two modes. One is workflow logistics, which is the one we're going to talk about today. And it comes down to what you see on the screen with those green boxes. It's the same for both modes at the end. And let me just point out the differences here. Termination or continuance at the end is not a normal thinking pattern for designing a lesson by the average teacher. They're like, okay, I did my lesson. It's sort of compartmentalized in my mind. But inside software, termination or continuance is usually a button, right? Am I going to allow this kid to continue forward to the next module, or what am I going to do? So there are major differences in how you would design in digital that are not existent in the old models. Not that every teacher was taught to be an instructional designer in the first place, but when we made this shift, everybody was in a mad scramble, and that's great. We got some stuff done. Some kids still learn some stuff. Now, like Monika said, you're kind of in this mode of leveling up and refinement, and Brad, and I think Kim, you said that too. So this understanding of number two, mapping and curating, onboarding kids onto the right level, and then selecting all the right tools, or else custom building your own stuff in the middle of it, implementing, these are all important concepts. So I'm gonna stop right there and have us just talk about one major issue in this design dilemma, which is, do teachers understand what digital can really do for them? Or Are they thinking, I want to maintain almost manual digital because it's what I'm used to? Are we yet at that inflection point of leaving the manual digital PDFs everywhere and just framework systems like LMSs? Because they're not, LMSs are great. They sort of automate everything, right? They're mostly repositories. We made that inflection point. Okay. So who wants to go first? Who's chomping at the bit?
LeiLani, I'm chomping at the bit on actually, and I don't know if I'm going to answer your question. I'm looking at the models, right? And I had previewed this in the links and read through. I think you provided us a little PDF, premise that was looking at it. And I'm honestly struggling at I want to, if I were to replace Addies model with the two models below, I'm struggling at what's the point of the orange versus the green. So that's where I needed some clarification.
Okay.
But in talking about the termination part 6 of the model, which I think you're absolutely right. That is a piece that's it's implied in Addies model, right? When you implement and then when you evaluate. But it's not really like a check mark there in defining that this is the termination point. This is the next logical point of, okay, now what? Where do they go from here? What's the path that they need to take if they've gotten to this step, right? And that's where the thing with content, computer generated content, it's all algorithmic based. So so I know AI should help make that better. But honestly, AI is algorithmic based itself. So it's inherently algorithmic based that is different than what a humanoid is that even a human person?
Yeah, that's a word. Yeah, that's a word.
Humanoid is the robot. So a human person, what are we even saying? It's an individual can. The critical thinking piece that an individual does is different than what the AI critical thinking component is, right? So yes. My wonder is, can AIs get to that level of what a human brain, a human emotion, a human relationship with the individual can do to, I don't know, diagnose a kid, understand where they're at, and then help plan out the next path for that kiddo?
Well, we're not at that point in AI yet. It's linear, right? It's branched linear logic, right? Yes. So if kept missing this kind of fractions question, then rebranch that child to this remedial section, right? That exists, and that is a type of AI, right? In fact, Edison can talk a little bit about their reteachables, because their system spots when a kid needs a reteachable.
Right.
Okay? But I want to address your question about discovery design versus workflow. Discovery is the first design model to be Socratic method digital, meaning understand that kids have access to the World Wide Web or maybe walled garden systems that are majestic. And you can just go, hey, go figure out the Civil War. Hey, go figure out, some health thing, right, that we all need, or, like whatever is your topic of the day. Here's your assignment. Go figure it out. Come back to me. So then it's not the teacher scoping out the entire development of a lesson sequence. It's the student using their own discovery and analytical skills to figure out, and they're posing thesis and all of that. Now, this is no middle school, high school kids do this, right? And some schools do this in project-based mode. But that not all the time, and it could be used much more frequently now that everybody has LMSs and majestic libraries of stuff digitally, right?
So what I'm hearing is that discovery design is down. You have it marked up front: teacher/student creating that individual playlist for the kiddo or with the kiddo, and doing it. Where the workflow logistic design, saying that the school district, the teachers in their PLCs are mapping out and planning out the curriculums. I think something that we're finding, at least in our LMS, is we're tapping into a little bit of those teachers planning out pathways for learning. You know, Canvas has things like mastery paths. So students are taking some pre-assessment and then they're delivered content based on the results of that pre-assessment. So it's a little customized, which some of the online platforms like Edison Learning, it sounds like, you know, will do, or like an IXL will do based on, you know, you missed the answer. Now you're going to get some different remedies. So we're starting to tap into that, which is giving our teachers some customization and some differentiation tools that they wouldn't have had, you know, they wouldn't have had before.
Right. Okay. So now, thank you for all that, Brad. I'm coming to you, Monika, because, you know, you're also solidly in the IT side. So your mind is probably already mapped to what digital can do branch-wise, shuttling attention around, moving attention and pieces around more than the very linear thinking of what happened in a classroom long ago. What are your thoughts on this workflow logistics design?
I was looking at this and I was thinking, you know, for me, I look at Addy, I look at EduJedi, and I see waterfall and agile. So that's immediately what I'm thinking, especially as I work with our staff. You know, internally, I have a PMO team. I have an applications development team, and so with those two teams, you know, agile and waterfall are very important concepts and frameworks. And so when you start looking, and it's funny because I started to introduce just the understandings and the underpinnings of those frameworks, and bringing them into the instructional space, especially the ed tech space, and trying to shift it over a little bit to the instructional space so that our team can understand just what you're talking about. I know for our school district, we're definitely still, you know, when you look at Addy, kind of following through and making sure that we meet all the pieces, and you know, we meet all of the requirements. We're still kind of there, but in our school district, you know, our curriculum and instruction division is very much trying to move towards. You look at your EduJedi model, you know, looking at that school and teacher. Because it was funny before. I think Brad was talking about the difference between the two, and for me, I started looking at it from when you look at the school versus the teacher, and then the school teacher, and then the teacher student, and look at the workflow logistics design and discovery design. For us, we talk about helping our schools develop what we call a digital learning roadmap. So for our school district, we have an ed tech or technology integration PLC that is systemic, and it's called Ignite U. And so for us, every year we provide goals that we're going to try to meet for Ignite U. We're like one of them, and we call them TICs, Technology Integration Connections, because we don't want to push them into a corner and this is what you have to do, but we want to empower them to be able to create empowered learning environments for their students. So in order, and so it lends itself exactly to these two workflow, I'll say WLD and D squared. It lends itself to those two and trying to move away from Addy for us. So I love this as I look at it, because that's exactly what we're trying to do, is strengthen our teachers and build those muscles for our teachers. But the first thing you have to do, I mean, you can work with the teacher and the teacher can work with the students and provide those authentic experiences for our students. But the reality of it is that we all live in is you still have to adhere to a level of standards and so forth that we are all accountable to. So finding that blend and being able to move in and out and make decisions and stop and say, okay, we have the workflow logistics design. We're going to follow through and ensure that the school and the teacher are on the same page. So for us, that's what we call our digital learning roadmap. We look at how we're going to, what is this going to look like for the entire year? What type of training do you need? How does this align to what is your CSIP, your school improvement plan say? What are you supposed to be working on? Where are the areas that you must work on? Okay, so now with our digital learning roadmap, what does this look like for your teachers? What do they need to provide? What does it look like for your students? And then what does it look like for your teachers? So this workflow logistics design fits right in there. I mean, perfectly, because it helps to ensure that those two dots are met. But then once you get that set up, now you get down to your discovery design piece, and you see where the teacher is able to follow. They have a framework, but now they have some play to be able to work with the students so the students can also be empowered in their own learning to help move in and out of this workflow design. So that's what I mean by agile in terms of you're following a framework, but sometimes you have to stop, and calibrate and say, is this working? So that's, I know I just gave y'all a lot, but that's in my mind. When you ask, be careful when you ask what is going on in my mind. But that's what's going on in my mind. I'm thinking waterfall versus agile. Being agile in this environment, when we think about hybrid learning, because your initial question was, are teachers ready for this, or are they really using it to do what they've always done? I think of SAMR all day and substitution and augmentation, and that is where I still see our teachers. We just had a conversation about printers yesterday, and I brought in SAMR, and of course our technicians are like, SAMR, and so I started talking to them about what that meant. But yeah, I think a lot of teachers are still at SAMR. At substitution and augmentation, and we do have some at modification and redefinition at the top. So all of that.
I love what you said. Yeah, that whole thing. And I wrote an article a long time ago about SAMR. The one problem I had with it was that it's not contextualized against the outside world. It's still within your view of your classroom and you and your students, versus thinking beyond that. This difference, and I love that you pointed it out, Monika, and I'm coming to you, Kimberly Knight, in a second here. Is the difference between Addies and EduJedi, either rail, is literally that digital transcends the lecture and handout. It's now in the ether and invisible and distributing things and collecting things and moving things around. Whereas lecture handout mode, paper textbook, poof, right? That's gone. That will never come back permanently, right? That's gone. All right. So Kimberly, what are your thoughts on this before we move into like looking at each individual item there, and then Wendy and Kelly too?
It's interesting because right before I joined you, I have been lucky enough to be part of a working group in Ohio with the Ohio Department of Education. We are actually creating a framework for personalized competency-based learning. And we feel like some of what happens, and we've been looking in your diagram here, is that teachers have to have permission to do this from the state level. Do you know what I mean? Because you're right, Monika, to your point. I mean, they look at, okay, I have to test on these standards, and my job performance is going to be tied to the outcomes, of my students, and that can put you in a very narrow path. And so it's not maybe the best way, we know, for learning to really occur. So there are other states working on this. We actually met with a couple other states, I think South Carolina and I can't remember, Utah maybe. But I think the work has to happen at that state level, because we all look up that path to what does the state expect from us to do within our districts, and we have some autonomy with that. But at the end of the day, we're expected for students to know these particular standards and competencies. So we have been looking at how do we structure this, and how do we come up with a framework that is supported by ODE and then rolled out to individual districts to say, look, it's okay, to teach like this. It's okay to be student driven. And we were kind of talking about, what does the teacher role look like? We almost have to define it for them so that they will embrace it. Are you a supporter? Are you a facilitator? Are you a champion? What is your role as the teacher? But it's very hard to give up that control in the classroom. We're very used to having that control down to that granular. I am the teacher. I will decide the learning. This is how I will deliver it. This is how you will bring it back to me. And so it's going to take a lot of work and we've started that here. We actually also have something called the Ohio Blended Collaborative, where it actually started because a lot of us adopted an LMS, a common LMS, so we could actually do work together. And to your point, when we first started using it, it was very shallow. It was a whole list of a bunch of resources out there, and they were still doing the same types of work. So we're working really hard to get teachers how to understand how to take that tool to embrace digital learning in a more positive way, and to allow students choice, student choice, their path, their pace, and not just all like a standardized way of learning. I have a child who had to be on a certain program. She was my honors AP kid and had some health issues. And I was watching what she was doing, and it was the absolute opposite of what we've been trying to get away from. It was a video with a short quiz. And once you do that, then another video and a short quiz. I mean, it was totally, I'm going to tell you this, and then you're going to pick A, B, C, or D. And I could staple her to the chair, and it still wouldn't help her move through that content because there was no engagement. So I think that is the big next path, is how do we digitally work with kids where we truly engage them in their learning and have them be in control of, I know that I need to be here and I'm here. And then what tools do I have available to get myself, from here to here, whether that be a digital tool, whether that be a conference with the teacher, whether that be working with peers, whether that be looking for outside resources. It's providing that toolkit for the teacher and the student to embed and use, this discovery piece. So
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. Interesting that you said it that way, and I think all three of you touched on the real question here underneath all of this is, what is the role of the teacher? What's being happening is that they feel fear rather than enthusiasm about the future and the fact that somebody's going to take a bunch of work off of them so they can be more human with the children, right? And I think we all need to start adopting that sales posture. Listen, digital should do more of your work so that you can be more on it, right? That's the
Kim,
shift your mind. Yeah.
Can I, LeiLani, I don't know if we're allowed to jump in and add a comment, but if you're okay, a quick comment on Kim. Kim, you nailed it when you saw in your daughter the reality of what digital content, a lot, unfortunately, of the current digital content that is available. That's the reality right now. Is it's like we're saying, hey, move to digital, and then you go to digital and you're like, hey, guess what? It's a video lecture with a multiple choice quiz on the backside. Like,
yeah.
So I fear if we just move to that, we made choices not to pick certain vendors because the content was like, that's the content we're going to get. Maybe we can make different choices. And in Blue Valley, that's part of that is why we said, let's build our own experiences, because we're going to have our own teachers teaching it. LeiLani, you're right. Student-centered, not teacher-centered teaching and learning is what we are going after. And the Clayton Christensen Institute put a white paper out recently. Tom Arnett, I think, is the one who authored it. But his first strategy around that was around, it says, empowering teachers to make their classrooms more student-centered. That was one of the takeaways from all this hybrid stuff that they found. So I agree with you, Kim, and good point.
Yeah, good points, all of you guys. And I think I want to move. I want to move quickly because I want to get into these things now. So I think what I want to do is give the screen over to Kelly for a second, because I want to have you show a few of these Addie's reasons, right? Like these, you all see in the dictionary, there's sort of basic precept here, right, about why move to a different sort of model. But then it has these why it's different. And I think it's important because once we take this recording of that we're all doing right now and put it out to, 6,000 people will watch it at midnight the next day. I want them to see what we're really talking about with these precepts for what's different, okay, in the models. So Kelly, can you dig into that? I know we can sort of understand number one and number two, and I think maybe you can show us number 5 here, because we're going to go fast, and maybe a few others ones. Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Until Kelly gets her screen share ready, I want to point out something about the instructional design models. One thing that I heard consistently, and I was so excited to hear it, was about all of you were saying student agency, and that was the difference in the two design models, especially when you got to number 6. And when I think about, Monika, the waterfall versus agile, right? That is so, you're spot on with that, because I think about my transition from the classroom and then being in ed tech and software development. When I was teaching in the traditional classroom, it was completely Addy and it was completely waterfall. And now that I'm designing digital curriculum, you always have that opportunity to adjust and to correct, and you're giving students ownership. And I love it, because that's, as I listen to all of you, that's what you're saying, is you're giving those students ownership and that opportunity to drive. And I see that as the big difference with the digital curriculum, and especially when you get to that step 6.
Yeah, and really, yeah, and Kelly, so you're going to show your screen right now. So you just sort of walk us through the thinking of what's different in professional grade versus what the flat digital a lot of teachers initially think with before they level up their thinking.
Sure. So I'll just go through, this one aligns to point number 5 and talking again just more about giving students that discovery moment, and while still giving teachers all of the resources they need. I like to think of, so this is an example of one of our project-based learning courses, and it's within our math course. And all of the project courses are divided into these 3 different parts: investigations and then an action project. And when you go through the investigation, that to me is like taking that heavy lifting off the teacher for direct instruction, so they can spend more time, where the external and the action project, it's really more like a framework given to the teacher. It's going to be things like rubrics with general components. It's going to be worksheets with guided questions. And what's really cool about these, especially in the external investigation part, we give students that discovery moment where they're going out into the real world and conducting interviews, gathering their own data, figuring out how to research whatever is asked of them. And then they're putting that stuff to use and coming up with things like making podcasts, videos, digital resources and posters and things. So that's just an example of number 5.
Can you also show us, I think we're going to go into, if you're following along in your own dictionary, another point here is these models disassemble the over-organizing around teachers only, with rigid grade and class and course schedules, step-by-step linearity. It's the digital thinking, Monika, that I was just, because you're in IT, and Brad and Kimberly, you guys are too, you think in a non-linear way how things can be knit together rather than the old linear Addies model. So you got it up. Go ahead, Kelly.
Sure. So when on the back end, when we're designing a course, we're thinking about students not only going through, coming in, okay, I should start at lesson 1 and go through lesson 45. That's going to be a small percentage. But most of the time we have students come in, they're taking a diagnostic assessment, and they don't need a lot of the lessons or in the order that we prescribe initially. So what we decided is we design a course by chunking it by concept. And we do that within units. So here's an example in an algebra course. We have a unit on inequalities. And from the teaching side, you can set up in the system, there's that capacity to customize it where, okay, I'm going to have my kids go through lessons 1 through 5. And if they don't need to go through 6 through 10, we can jump to this unit here. Or maybe I want to have them jump to this unit first for whatever reason. Maybe I have a project that involves inequalities and I want to get to that first before I get to something that might be right before this unit. And the way students move through those things, the teacher can ask the system to do that. So it's not up to the teacher to be manually clicking, assigning different lessons at each time.
There's some really good points. I want to stop you there for a second and come back to the panelists. Monika, since I've been mentioning you a lot, I know you know from the IT field this nonlinear thinking, right? why don't you go ahead and comment what your thoughts are about all this?
Well, as I'm looking and I'm thinking about even our content and for our virtual academy and how we present content, and the conversation about ensuring that it's not linear, giving the students a choice and an opportunity to know what they need to learn, to understand what they need to learn, but giving them the opportunity to focus where what direction would they like to go. I always say planes, trains, automobiles. Here's your finish line. This is where you need to get to. And so if it works for you, as you mentioned, to go to lesson 31 and then back to lesson 26, then let's do it. If you want to start with the project first so that you can begin with the end in mind and understand what you need to learn from and that would be me. What do I need to learn from these other modules? I would jump ahead and I would jump back. So I love that about that is the thought process that's being placed into content into such as this. And as you look at I'm looking at the course map itself, but I'm looking at how it's laid out and the points that you made. I think it's very important for us to be able to present content in that way. I will tell you, for us, one of the things that I mentioned when we had to procure content, one of the things that we had to do was, I call it unstitching it and then realigning it to our standards as a school district to make sure that we were, because if they're moving from virtual and then back to the school, you don't want to be so far off, in terms of what they're learning that it's an irrelevant experience. So we had to have some, again, you have to have an undercurrent, something kind of stitching it out together. But even with that, they have choice, to be able to determine, which lessons they want to get through. But we still, to a certain degree, kind of lock some of it down. So I'm thinking, and that's where that goes to your previous question, where our teachers are. We're not quite there yet, but we have the capacity. And looking at something like this definitely creates the opportunity to look at it in that manner. How do you support students in that way? They've got to be empowered. We do not know what they're going to be doing on down the line. They talk about how many times they'll change. I think I learned that from you, LeiLani. How many times they'll change their careers, and how many times within a career, how many times they'll change jobs, and just how society and how what we're doing as a society, how it's changing. I always tell people, look at how everything shifted from working in a restaurant to delivering food via Uber Eats. Just like that, things changed in terms of what the job market looked like. So looking at that, children have got to understand how to think and not what to think. And so I think that this lends itself to provide that support.
Excellent comments. I'm going to take a screen back for now, Kelly, from you, because I think you've also showed us a couple other points I know I wanted you to show, which were independent learning pathways and a couple other things that are on these. But I want to wrap up the rest of the hour with just comments about really what we're looking at when we're looking at all of the reasons this is different, because I'm sure Kim and Brad also have comments about what's different. Brad, you want to go first?
Sorry, LeiLani,
Yeah.
You broke up on the what's different?
Yeah, if you want to just go ahead and comment. I'm showing back on screen the points of what's different, but Monika just also mentioned, life all around us has changed. So of course that's different too. So what are your comments?
Yeah, I think the big difference that I think that I like is the focus goes towards personalization. The focus goes towards where I think where we say we want to take our classrooms. I say that because and maybe we struggle to really articulate as school. We're a public school district, and so I think we need to get back to say, what's our role? What's our purpose? What's our mission? We have our mission statement, right? We're going to reimagine learning, change the world. We're going to empower all students, personal excellence, and we had all this good stuff. How does that play out in our classrooms? Do we really want, when we say personalized learning, does that really mean like every kid on some individual playlist doing their own thing at their own time? Is that really what we're saying? Or do they get covered up because? So I like the emphasis on the individual. That's the difference.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that point up, because I have to tell you, that is the friction, right? That's what the American public now wants. They discovered digital learning by a couple $1 billion uptick in app markets and online schools last year in April, May, June. They want that. The whole group concept, it's getting,
The
pounded right now.
The piece that's hard though is they come back. I mean, we're seeing it here, and these kids, they need that camaraderie, the socialization, the extracurricular.
We know that.
That component too. And so it's interesting. I think more schools will be open towards competency type learning to allow for more freedom, flexibility, and I think the leaning into tools that allow for that customized flexibility is definitely going to be on the horizon here.
I totally agree with you. I'm going to come to you next, but I want to point out here that the digital model in this EduJedi model, so everybody think about this for a second, and Kimberly, I'm going to have you talk about it, and Wendy, I'm going to have you wrap us up. Intersection of the human with the other humans, right? Multiple ones, cohort, like you just said, Brad, and I think Monika, you mentioned this too, versus one-on-ones. Uber does this very well. We're not using anything like that in education yet, but it's coming. It's called hybrid logistics. Learning councils talk about it a lot. Intersection of multi-level calendaring and all that kind of stuff. The intersection logistics doesn't exist yet well anywhere unless it is fully individualized learning. And Edison can talk about this when we are coming to you after Kim. So Kimberly, lot been said. Go, your turn.
Okay, so I've been reflecting as I've been listening along the way, and I think that we teach the way we were taught, the way that we learned, and that has drastically changed. So I look at my own children, and so I used to teach business management, so pardon me as I flip over into that world for a second, but I used to teach about just-in-time inventory. Companies went to the fact that they didn't just keep inventory housed at their location, they brought it in as they needed it to go on the assembly line. And I have realized that I think that's the way our kids are learning now. They really do kind of just-in-time learning. They don't want a stack of facts, levied back in there somewhere that they can retrieve. They have Google for that, right? So they learn in time to use what they learn. And that is very different than the way we are used to delivering content in the classroom. But I think that we would engage them more if we met them more like that. And that to me is what this new type of design looks like, because it's recognizing the fact that these kids learn in a different way than we did. And it's okay. I mean, a lot of like the pushback in the community is, well, if it was good enough for me, it should be good enough for my child. But your child is different. They absorb content in a whole different way than what we did. So they need to be allowed to learn like that. And this type of approach, I think, allows for that. It allows them to, take what they need in the time, learn it, use it, collaborate to learn it together. And then I also think a big piece is that we've been talking a lot about feedback along the way, and then also authentic work that is presented outside of the classroom walls. Because if we all do the same project, we really don't want to sit and hear one after the other give a speech about it, or show the same PowerPoint on a loop with different graphics. Like, we need authentic work that is presented outside of that classroom for authentic review, and making those connections then with the community can lead to that. So
wow,
those are my thoughts.
Yeah, so awesome. You just, we could stay on for 3 more hours talking just about the depth that you just went into. Wow. Okay, so I want to go back to Wendy and then have us do final wrap up. Kelly, you've been really awesome too, by the way. I'm sorry I didn't give you more time to show more of what's actually happening here. But Wendy, I know you have a lot to say about what we've been talking about. And I want you to talk a little bit from the professional grade side on intersection logistics. Like, when do you use humans at their most appropriate?
Yeah, so one thing I have to say is, as we've talked about this today, is I think about Addie was developed in 1975 as a model, right? And I think about what we've been through in just a year and how much expectations for education has changed, right? But then I think about how much has our television changed since 1975? right? I mean, when did we actually have access to the internet? When did it start, creeping into our lives, and how much has that influenced change based on consumer demand? And if you look at what's happening to education right now, is parents realize they have a choice and a voice, and there's consumer demand. And I believe that's really where the EduJedi model comes in strong, is because now we want that personalized learning for our children, for our students. And from a software perspective, again, going back to what Monika said, it's very similar to Agile. And so when you get to that number 6, right, that's where you have teacher intervention, and in no way should the teacher be replaced, right? To your question, LeiLani, I think it is so critical that you have the software or the curriculum developed using the EduJedi model, and then that pushes out the data that the teacher can interpret and then serve as a facilitator to even more personalize the learning for the students. But if the content is developed the right way, especially, and you see this a lot in the professional grade because the resources are there, right? If the content's developed in the right way in the professional grade, then the data is available for the teacher to use as a resource and a tool to really personalize and individualize that learning for the student.
Excellent comment. Great points that were made. Well, we can all talk about this for another, 16 hours about where the teacher intersection is in this model, step 5, step 6, the implementation, the coding, the nonlinearity. Kim, you just took us down like the seriousness of the student agency being so different, and they learn in little tiny chunks. They can't even sit. There are 18-year-olds who can't hear a whole lecture. They bug out after 5-10 minutes onto this. They're like, oh, under the table, they can't, they literally aren't wired to do it. So we really have a moment. I don't think it could be more exciting in education than to be alive right now. As rough as it is, let's just be all really super excited about the amazing transition we're all living through and trying to lead. So final comments from my 3 panelists, and then Wendy and all that. Monika, final comments.
Well, my final comment is that, as you mentioned, it is a pretty exciting time. I think some days, I'm just kidding, it's always an exciting time in education for me. It has been throughout my 28-year career, because being in this space my entire career, I've seen it all, and I've watched it all unfold. And so it's exciting to be right here and to even see this change, because Addie has been with us, as you mentioned, it was 1974, right? Forever. And so with that being the case, watching us have an opportunity to transition to something a little more agile and a little more relevant for students, because that's really why we do this, I think is a great place to be. It's just that I do see the challenge for us in preparing our staff and even our communities and parents and their expectations of what learning should look like for their students, because they're stuck on the way they learned. So and so with that being the case, it's going to be exciting to see what type of collaboration and advocacy you're going to see wrapped around moving towards these types of models to support learning.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, Brad.
Wow, I have a million thoughts, but my one thought is, has your parent or your grandparent, have they ever ordered and gotten an Uber to go from point A to point B? My guess is maybe not. That's my guess. And so to that point that Monika just raised, our community has one view of or an expectation of what school and learning is supposed to look like. The pandemic has given us, to Wendy's point, has given consumers and families a taste of some alternatives that they weren't even considering, but now we're like, hey, maybe that's a thing. And Kim, my thoughts were going back to your comments around, and I keep going back to this. Schools need to decide to figure out very clearly, and communities, what is the purpose? What is the point of the school? And do we need to pivot into becoming more connectors, facilitators of that learning to help each individual kid excel or continue to cohort group, or maybe it's a hodgepodge. I don't have the answer yet, but I think these hard questions need to be answered of schools in order for schools to continue. So great conversation. Wow, my mind is going a million directions.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Yeah, I believe we started off with we're trying to perfect everything now, and that perfection of what the human intersection looks like is going to cause some soul searching nationwide. What is needed between human to human as a perfection of that piece, right? Not just the tech. How do we perfect that? Kim.
Yeah, I think that I'm excited. I mean, this is my 29th year in education, and so you kind of live through a lot of the newest fad or the newest thing. But I think really this is the culmination. This is what we've been moving toward for decades of where we should be, and we just haven't, for some reason, been able to get over some of those barricades to get us there. And it's why I wake up every day. And I'm also thankful for things like this, because I've found that being able to stretch outside of the boundaries of your own district is the most wonderful piece of this. It should be what our kids do too, right? So again, just outside of the walls of the classroom, think about how much we hear from other people that we collaborate with. So I appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to keeping on.
Yeah, this has been great. We could have spent 3 more hours together. Thank you, everyone. This has been your host, LeiLani Cauthen, and we're next up with our activity M13 for the EduJedi on digital instructional design. This time we're going to go deeper into discovery design as a conversation. That's our next panel next week. Love all of you guys. Thank you so much, Brad, Monika, Kim, Wendy, Kelly. You were awesome. See you next time, and thank you very much for contributing. All right, bye for now.